at this moment because I know both of these words really well, but I actually mispronounced it. My pronunciation was never been good enough to be situated between full and fell. That was really the reason why it sounds really like the full, but even though I pronounce it as a fell, because I know the filte und tombe really well. Tombe and filt. Ganz einfach. I have never made a mistake, but my pronunciation was slightly sounding really like fall, even though I wanted to pronounce a fell. That was really the reason I actually had to renew it, because I was under a suspicion. That was really the reason why. I don't really need to think about anything. Revelation and testimonies and Trump in a tightrope. I don't really need to repeat anything. The procedure of the impeachment launched against Donald Trump just actually came to renew itself by overcoming its first step in a spectacular way on Wednesday for the first time since the beginning of the investigation that has been conducted already 6 weeks before. And the Capitol has already conducted its own series of hearings publicly by hosting a multiple inquest into the impeachment. Despite all the refusal for cooperation by the White House in the Ukraine affair, the commission, as the committee taken by the Democrats, the chief charged with the investigative authority in the House of the Representatives, has already heard more than a dozen of testimonies and a week and 8. So many different opinions were actually given behind the closed door, and those are actually open camera also the cases. And however, the actual interviews take its own place in front of the camera to be televised by the multiple channels. What I want to say is, dozens of them were already conducted behind the closed doors under a secretive circumstances, right? And I mean, it's really true. However, the actual interviews that actually take place very in front of the cameras, watched by Americans in a televised way. That's the truth. Both of them actually coexist. I'm not lying. I never made a mistake. The actual telespectators have already been able to understand while the long hours of investigative hearings on Thursday, the highest diplomat officer from the United States to Kiev, somehow he was able to deliver the new elements reinforcing the suspicion against the President of the United States, questioned by the Commission of the Intelligence, William Taylor, veteran of Vietnam, nominated by Donald Trump to this post, has noticeably depicted with the words less diplomatic to pressurize the President Donald Trump in the revelation of Donald Trump's conduct, which he had already put a pressure on homologue officer, which is the President of Ukraine, to open up a case against his son, Joe Biden's son. According to him, this was very alarming and devastating and suspicious and manipulative, as a military aid destined to Ukraine could have been frozen or could have been changed depending upon the opening of investigative inquiry on the case of the president's rival in the presidential election in the view of the next approaching election. However, he has revealed very informative new information. On July 26th, the actual day after the telephone interview, in the heart of the Ukraine investigation, which has already precipitated the revelation of the impeachment procedure, the American ambassador following from the European Union, Golden Sondland, had already been known that the President Donald Trump was interested more into the question over Joe Biden than the Ukraine itself. William Taylor has already delivered this story, which is really Bill Taylor. He has already said the story in front of the Congress. He has equally declared that a diplomatic channel as a canal, irregular, had been used to communicate with Ukraine, and this directed canal as a military channel and the diplomatic connection by the personal lawyer of the President Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, who actually pursued this pipeline as a diplomatic channel, according to him, the interest that have been affected concerning the actual meeting with the affected people in terms of the long-term American policies and politics in operating away from the official channel. He actually, sound more like the person who actually justified his choice of staying away from the official lines that was supposed to be used. That was confirmed by the Bill Taylor with absolute certainty. The president himself was more concerned with his own interests by actually homing in on the Ukraine, by pressurizing the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, instead of actually minding the actual business concerning the diplomatic relations, right? Following from this hearing, the actual chief of the Democrat Party in the Congress has already for the first time utilized the term of corruption to designate the suspicions weighing heavily down on President Donald Trump. This word, which has never been used at the risk of defaming the president, because it could actually be about the accusations cited by the Constitution to justify the impeachment. So this has been a reason why. This is not really a random choice that has been actually really made because this corruption was decided, because it has been the proper clause that could actually be justified. It's about actual justification by mounting the pressure on President Donald Trump, because the Constitution gives a ratification for this type of impeachment, and it has been chosen with the proper consideration. For Nancy Pelosi, the corruption consists of the accordance or the suspension of the military aid in exchange of the public declaration concerning the wrong inquiry into the election. This represented such an tentative evidence of the part of the president, which actually gives advantage for his own 2020 re-election. And the right-hand side, Donald Trump affirmed the conversation with his Ukraine homologue was perfect, and he denounces this type of hetzenjagd, the witch hunt, and defamation and the political game as a dirt rendering the arguments taken by the grand majority in the Republican parliamentary congressional office would be behind him by taking their positions to endorse his causes, by impeding the progress. However, the electors would actually do the same. Dozens of public auditions are going to take place up until the November 20th before the Senate. However, the public opinion, which would actually play a crucial role following from the procedures. In 1974, the public hearings have already played such an important role to actually move away the 10 points by taking the favorable opinions away to endorse impeachment for Richard Nixon, which eventually had led to his own step down before the actual impeachment procedure. Because the public opinions that had already played very important roles to hike up the 10 points supporting or favorable for the impeachment process and impeachment of Richard Nixon, which had eventually broken away to the actual step down before the impeachment recognition. Then is it going to actually turn itself into a new impeachment procedure with much powerful understanding? And what actually learns from this interviews, and what actually, it could actually be earned from this investigation with the public hearings, the opinions could actually turn itself by turning the cold shoulder and turning the back on Donald Trump, or giving the cold shoulder to Donald Trump. Then what would actually be the next steps? What are the consequences in the election campaign for 2020 election?